This movie won Best Picture 20 years ago. From 2004, we are talking $1 Million Baby. Well, Zach, this was your pick. Tell us about $1 Million Baby, your experience with it and all that.
I went with my second best option, which is the Best Picture winner from 2004, $1 Million Baby. And I think sometimes on this podcast, when we do deep dives, it's of course fun to do the Girl Next Door types and the Batman types. But it's also fun to do the movies that got a lot of critical praise and we haven't really returned to or talked about that much. I would not put $1 Million Baby as like my top one in my top 100. I think I had it in my top 10 of 04. And I certainly remember not having any real issues with it winning Best Picture at the 2004 Oscars. It was an interesting Oscar race. The closest comparison to 04 would have been 2021. And $1 Million Baby was Coda and The Aviator was Power of the Dog, because up until like those last couple weeks, The Aviator was going to sweep that Oscars. And it was going to be Marty's first win. It was going to be Leo's first win. But then the critics, led by Roger Ebert, shifted the narrative quite a bit toward $1 Million Baby, which, again, I didn't have too much of an issue with. The Aviator is a good movie too. But yes, $1 Million Baby. We make fun of Hilary Swank on this podcast. She is a two-time Oscar winner. She's what I call the Eli Manning of Oscar winners. I mean, she has two random Oscars about 5 years apart that don't make a whole lot of sense in terms of her larger career. But hey, I'm there for it. She beat Annette Bening both times, which is kind of interesting. She didn't win for Conviction, though, sadly. But it's a well-deserved Oscar, I think. I mean, obviously, we all would pick Uma Thurman in Kill Bill as the winner for 04 overall. But, Todd would maybe pick Julia Roberts or Natalie Portman. But I'm a fan of this movie. Watching it again, I hadn't seen it in quite a while. I do sometimes turn it on, but it's also a movie that, this was a movie that really capitalized on deceptive campaigning, because you went into it thinking that it was just going to be a fun kind of, David versus Goliath sports movie. And then it turned into like really depressing, like social realism and ethical considerations. And in other words, an Oscar movie, for lack of a better term. So I usually turn it off at about the point when Billy the Blue Bear appears. So watching the last 45 minutes of this movie, I hadn't really seen it in a while. I think this movie holds up pretty well. I mean, I got to say, I like it more than Mystic River. I would say it's certainly in Eastwood's top 5 movies that he's directed. I think he's really good in the movie, too. Obviously, Giamatti didn't get an acting nomination in 04, which is one of the great oversights in the history of the Oscars. We probably could have done without Clint's Best Actor nomination, but he is pretty good in the movie. Obviously, this was the movie that also brought Morgan Freeman his well overdue Oscar in a role that isn't too unlike Red from The Shawshank Redemption. They have some great banter in the movie, great old man banter. You could probably rename this movie Grumpy Old Men 3. It's fun. I mean, once you get into this movie, it does take a hold of you. You do really root for Maggie and Frankie, and they have a great partnership. It's fun to see this kind of seedy underground world of women's boxing. We're going to do a Mount Rushmore, a little bit of female athletes. I would put Frankie on the Mount Rushmore of lovable sexists in movies. It's got some nice quirks to it. We got Jay Baruchel in this movie for some reason. We have Anthony Mackie in this movie. I kind of forgot they were there. Michael Pena. The movie was shot, if you listen to Clint's acceptance speech, it was shot for 37 days. I'm sure a lot of that time was being done by 3:00 so he could hit the links. There are parts of this movie that maybe don't work as well as some other movies. It's kind of funny that this movie beat out The Aviator, which I'm sure was a movie that took a lot more than 37 days to make and a lot more attention to detail. But I'm here for it. I think it's a fun movie. I still retain my 4-star rating. I'm not quite as ecstatic about it as Ebert was in 04, but I think it holds up pretty well. And I think it's a fun movie to talk about. So I'm here for it. And yes, $1 Million Baby. Fun movie, great for the family, great uplifting, happy movie that you laugh at by the end. Okay, no, you don't laugh at the end, but it is a fun rewatch. Maybe it is not, but fun to talk about. I guess we shall see.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good movie to talk about, and it'll be a fun one to deep dive. I'm at 4 stars too, and have been since I watched it for the first time. Todd is the only one that doesn't have it in his top 10 of 2004. It's our number 5 of 2004 as a website. I've seen this. I think this was the 3rd time I've watched this movie. I watched it the first time I watched it, I don't really remember. I don't think I might have seen this in the theaters. I think, or I may have just bought the DVD. I have the DVD. Then I watched it again when I showed it to my wife for the first time, and then this last week I watched it. I remember the beats of it as I'm going along. Like I'm kind of the opposite of you, Zach. Like the first like 2/3 of it, it's a good movie, but there's nothing great about it. But then the last third, that third act, when everything changes, and she has the fight with the blue bear, that's when this movie becomes something more, because then all of a sudden it's a completely different movie. The tone completely changes, and it's when you see the best out of everybody in this movie. It's when you see Hilary Swank come to life. It's when you see Clint Eastwood come to life, and it just rips your heart out in the best way possible. And that's what makes this a special movie, is how the ending hits you. Before that, I mean, it's the female Rocky. I mean, Hilary Swank starred in the female Karate Kid, and now she's in the female Rocky. But then once that happens, like, oh, that's what makes this movie different. And I remember even thinking that when I was watching it. It's like, oh, now I get it. Now I see. And yeah, I don't know why I hadn't revisited it. It is a fun watch. It's a very memorable movie. Like, I'd seen it only those 2 times, and that had been a while. But even only having those 2 times watching it, there are beats in this movie that I remember so clearly. And we talk about, like, a couple weeks ago, we talked about the most average movies out there that, I mean, you see once or twice and then you forget everything about. This is not one of them. You remember distinct parts of this movie very well. So that's how I think of this. I have it number 7 of 2004. Zach has it number 6. Adam has it number 5. I don't know how much of the conversation it was of potentially me getting this into my top 100, but Todd, what about you?
Yeah, I have this. Looks like I have it ranked 13th on my 2004 list. And I didn't think I had seen this movie very much. I must have watched it a few times back when we first got the DVD, because I remember, yeah, like you said, I remembered a lot of it pretty well. But I honestly had not turned it on in a long time, like any part of it. So maybe it just stuck with me, but I mean, there are parts I could almost quote the whole scene, so I must have watched it a few times. But I think the movie really moves, which is interesting, because when I was starting to watch it, I was like, I mean, it's 135 minutes, and I remembered it was like kind of had a sad ending, and I was just like, I don't really want to sit through this. But then, like, the last 90 minutes go by so fast. Like, it is a blistering last 90 minutes, and which is weird because it's not a movie where a whole lot happens, and there's not like a whole lot of exciting things. Like, we don't get a full 20-minute fight like we do in Rocky. We get like very short glimpses of fights, but everything is character based, and you just get so enthralled in the conversations that the movie just goes by. And I think when I first watched it, I don't necessarily remember what I thought of it the first time I watched it. I mean, we watched all the Best Picture nominees from that year pretty much in succession, I feel like, for the first time, because none of them we saw in the theater. And this one stood out because of the emotional impact, probably. But I mean, it is a boxing movie, and then it becomes like Terms of Endearment or something, and that is something that to me was interesting, and something I obviously was not expecting going in. I do like the movie a lot. I'm not sure I would move it into my top 10 of 2004. I think 2004 is a great year, but it is an interesting movie to talk about, and there are more characters than I remembered being in it. I just remembered like the few. I think at the SAGs there were only 3 nominees from the movie, if I remember right, because that was the first like awards I actually ever followed. So, but I mean, there's a bunch of characters, and yeah, it'll be a good conversation to have.
Yeah, I remember I saw this movie first day it came out. I remember going through like the school week, looking forward to it coming out. I also remember the Ebert and Roper episode where Ebert was just lavishing so much praise on it. And you got to remember, like back in 2004, when the trailers came out for this movie, this was not necessarily like heralded as an Oscar movie. It was kind of a late entry. And
as most of Clint's movies are.
Yeah, and exactly. And seeing Ebert give it 4 stars after having seen the trailer and just thinking, okay, this is another female Rocky movie that's probably there for more of an aim to make money than to actually get awards buzz. I knew that there was something deeper to the movie. I remember watching the movie and even watching it last night. I remember thinking this. I was thinking like, okay, something's got to happen in this movie. This is not just a normal David versus Goliath boxing movie. Like, okay, do they get into some sort of weird fetishistic sexual relationship? Does this movie have something to do with, I don't know, sexism? And I mean, it does, it does have to do with that. But I knew that something had to happen at the ending of this movie. And the other thing to remember about this movie is back in 2004, 2005, when this came out, this was like a big topic of conversation. Like Terry Schiavo was in the news. There's a very famous person who wanted to, what they do called die with dignity with euthanasia.
I haven't heard that name in forever.
Right. This was right around the same time. I think she was a few months maybe after this movie. And of course, it was kind of like The Crying Game a little bit. Like, do you spoil this movie by talking about the social issue that it's addressing? But of course, if you do that, you're really being unfair to the people who haven't seen it. So I think part of this movie, besides just the Ebert praise, was just sort of the cultural discussion that happened with it, which necessitated that you had to see it. Because again, this was just like a little bit, tiny bit pre-internet. You didn't know what the ending was. You couldn't go on Twitter or Reddit and see what people were talking about. You had to actually go to the theater. I would say that this was one of the very last times in our culture where you actually had to go to the theater and watch the movie to understand why people were so enamored with it and why it was also controversial in a way. Of course, Clint Eastwood at that time was still known as someone who was relatively right-wing in political circles, and he's dealing with something that was kind of an issue that was more supported by Democrats and people on the left in 2004. So there's this other dynamic to the movie that's really interesting. But yes, a great movie. And I think I was nervous that it wouldn't hold up well. I think it held up really well. Like, I was still surprised by directions where it went. It was familiar, but it wasn't like obvious where it was going. And Todd's absolutely right. Like this flies by at 2 hours and 15 minutes. I think sometimes we make fun of, movies having to have excessive length to be considered like serious or considerable Oscar contenders. But like this movie flies by. It's really well edited by Joel Cox, who does most of Eastwood's movies. And it's a real fun watch.
Joel Cox got a nomination for editing. So did Paul Haggis for adapted screenplay. But yeah, it got editing, it got adapted screenplay. Clint got nominated for actor, and then it won picture, actress, supporting actor, and director. I remember when this Oscars, $1 Million Baby, like you said, it felt like it was going to be The Aviator. But The Aviator had all the techs, right? It was winning all the below the line stuff. And then $1 Million Baby, it was only nominated for the above line stuff. Like it had editing, which it didn't win. It didn't even win screenplay. So like going into the big group, like
lost one of the 2 greatest movies ever made. I mean, when you're going up against
it lost to Sideways. Exactly. But and so I remember going in like it's like this is gonna be interesting, and then Morgan wins supporting actor and Swank wins actress, and then Clint wins director, and that was it. It's like as soon as Clint won director, like this is gonna take it. Like the whole tide shifted. Like. But I just remember that night. It's like this might be The Aviator. The Aviator might pull this all out. And
I felt like $1 Million Baby was going to win. I think Clint still holds the record for oldest director to win an Oscar. I believe he's still the oldest director to win Best Director.
I think it was like 73.
74,
somewhere in there.
I remember at the Oscars, he gave a shout out to Sidney Lumet, who got the Legacy Award that night. And the other cool thing about that night, too, is that Clint brought his mom. who he also had brought to the 92 Oscars. And he's like, and at 96, I'm thanking her for her genes. And yeah, I've always liked his acceptance speech. Actually, the Best Picture, all 4 of their acceptance speeches were all very good. Hilary Swank had a good acceptance speech too, where she had forgotten to thank Chad, what's his name, because her fiance or husband in the first one. So I'd like to think that I don't make the same mistake twice. And you just feel bad for Annette Bening. I mean, Annette Bening was a Tom Brady. Like, how do you lose to this woman twice? Felt like I was like 18 years old again. It was, in a weird way, it was like a rejuvenating movie.
I don't think so at all. This movie doesn't really age at all. Like I didn't feel like this felt like any other era. This could have come out today. It would have been made the same way.
Well, that's
yeah,
okay.
I think you're right. It does kind of feel timeless, and I think part of that is just the way Clint makes movies. Right. Like he's got that aesthetic to him that like this, like if he had made like Richard Jewell in 2004 and $1 Million Baby in 2019, neither of those look different. They look exactly the same.
And that is a great point. I actually wrote that down. I think if there's one big takeaway that at least I had watching this movie, the charm of this movie is that in 2004, it was considered old-fashioned and classical. In 2024, it's considered old-fashioned and classical. Like, Todd's exactly right. Like, the experience of watching the movie, it's the exact same. Like, I think in 2004, you could say this movie feels like a not a retread, but an homage to an earlier era of filmmaking, and it still does today. I just think, I don't know, a movie like this is probably not going to win Best Picture today. I don't see that happening because it's too serious and it's not uplifting and inspirational, and people would probably reveal the secret, and that would probably take away from the Oscar viability for the movie. I guess what I'm saying is I guess I'm nostalgic for movies like this that didn't have to be $300 million, didn't have to have an A-list cast necessarily, but could still be competitive at the Oscars.
I mean, it's not a $30 million budget. It's not like it was like an independent movie or something.
That's small. That's an independent movie budget though. $30 million. I bet Closer was made for more money. I mean, that's a small budget for a movie.
When Closer is considered independent, or was back then.
One of the other things that I realized like instantly in this is, first off, from the first shot, you can tell it's a Clint movie because it has his, just the lack of any color saturation in like the whole thing. The other thing you can tell is that this is a Clint score. And I realized listening to or watching this, just how derivative a lot of his scores are of his own scores. Like I'm listening, like, am I watching $1 Million Baby or am I watching Flags of Our Fathers? Because those two scores sound exactly the same. Or is it Mystic River? I mean, it could be that too. They all kind of have a similar sound, a similar theme to them in their simplicity. But it also just like it fits a Clint, that they all have the same kind of vibe to it. Now, I think what puts $1 Million Baby kind of over the top is so many of his movies, they just kind of tell the story. But the fact that this is one, it completely flips on its head. That's something you don't see much from a Clint movie. I mean, what this and maybe like Changeling, you would say, are the ones that just completely flip on their head. The rest are just like subtle storytelling. All right, well, let's get into some of our categories here. Highest war performance. I'm going to go first on this. This is kind of tough. I'm going with Morgan Freeman though. Especially when you're going to have voiceover throughout the entire movie. No one does it quite like Morgan Freeman. And he just like, what you're getting as soon as you hear Morgan Freeman's voice, and it just, there's nothing quite like it. So he's my highest war. He did win an Oscar for it. Finally, probably not his best performance, but I think it's one of his higher war performances.
I'll say Hilary Swank, and I don't think it's necessarily her best performance even, but what she does with it makes me feel like it's really hard to see anybody else doing that. And she was ripped. Like when she was doing the jump rope, I was like, holy shit, look at her abs. Like, I don't know how I would think like Hilary Swank athlete, but she made it work. And it's also the rare Hilary Swank role where she actually is kind of happy at times. Like she has a lot of tragic characters, but like when she like is winning fights, I was like, is she smiling? Hilary Swank smiles. Like she's got that in her bag too. So I think she's great in this, and I never really gave her credit for it back in 2004. I thought it was kind of a fraudulent Best Actress win, but I think she's really good.
That's a good call. I think she's really good too. I don't know how high of a war it is. That's why I didn't go with her, but she is really good.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you can turn Hilary Swank to looking like that, then you could make any actress look like that. I wonder how long she trained for.
I would have gone Hilary Swank, also because isn't she from Southwest Missouri? Like, isn't she from that part of the country? And she grew up in a trailer park. And I think there's some degree of autobiography to the Maggie Fitzgerald character. But
she was born in Lincoln, Nebraska.
They're a great city, home of
that's
the greatest team in the country.
That's where Boys Don't Cry was set, right?
I'm going to go with Margot Martindale for all the reasons we mentioned. Even though I guess now there's an MMA of a new award that we'll have, but Margot Martindale. I mean, there's no one else who could play that role. Come on, when they did the studio cast, this was even before she was a legendary character actress. So I think this kind of launches her career, and I'm sure it's one of BoJack Horseman's favorite movies too.
Bill Paxton Memorial, worst performance.
Okay, so I don't think he even has a credit or uncredit, but I'm going with the bell dinger. He has like one shot, and he had this like disgusted frown on his face that he was having to pull the bell string. And I watched this movie twice, and both times I was like, what the hell? Well, couldn't they have gotten anybody to do that other than that guy? But I don't think he's actually has a credit, so I can't even shout out the name. So the bell dinger in one of the fights and like the montage of all of her knockouts. That's what I'm going with.
That is obscure.
Okay, I'm going to go with the rare highest war and worst performance as the same character. I'm going Margot Martindale. I think she also simultaneously plays this character way too over the top. Maybe not necessarily her fault, but there's like in a movie that I think has a lot of nuance. There's no nuance to that character whatsoever. And if you want to criticize the movie, like I think a richer movie might have treated her family with more, again, complexity rather than just being these very simple-minded, stereotyped white trash rednecks. And that part of the movie is a little bothersome to me in a movie that is about a fundamental moral quandary that the character goes through. It's very obvious to just dash out all the hate on Maggie's family. They make very convenient villains over the course of the movie. So maybe less about the performance of the character, more just about the way that those characters are treated.
So I have an answer for you where the title came from. So it's based on a book called Rope Burns, right?
Yes.
Well, it's an anthology of short stories, and one of the short stories that they used is $1 Million Baby.
So it's semi based on a true story because the short stories were. I read that part where it was like a former ring guy or something.
Oh, okay.
Wrote a bunch of FX Tool, a former boxing trainer.
Yeah, and there were 3 short stories that were put together: The Monkey Look, $1 Million Baby, and Frozen Water. So my worst performance, it's Clint Eastwood. I'm gonna go with it.
Oh, come on.
He
showed some love, man.
So he has moments in this movie where he's really good. But most of the time, he's really bad. And I think it's not necessarily him, it's the wrong casting. Like, it's just, he's not the right one. Like, I was thinking about this, watching him, like, try to, like, boxer move, and, like, no. Like, this just doesn't work. Or what? Your left, put up your left. Like, it feels so forced. Like, anybody else could have done this better. And I was trying to think, like, and the one I came up with, Todd mentioned him a little bit ago. There were 2 movies starring him in the top 5 when this was out. Robert De Niro could have been Frankie in his sleep and been 10 times better than Clint Eastwood. And
would have jacked the budget up.
Yeah, probably, but it would have been better. I'm looking through the IMDb trivia page, and apparently Morgan Freeman was originally approached to play Frankie, and he said, no, I want to play Scrap instead. But Morgan Freeman would have done better as Frankie, I think. It just didn't work. And like I said, he's got moments that are really good, and it's mostly the stuff at the end. but he's also got moments that it just doesn't work, and he's just yeah.
Well, De Niro would have been too young, right? Like in 2004, he would have only been like 50 or something.
I mean, De Niro was old enough to have a 6-year-old daughter played by Dakota Fanning. So I don't think he was quite that old yet. I think that is a terrible take, by the way. I think Clint Eastwood, what's a better performance that Clint Eastwood has given in a movie? He's actually fantastic in this movie. Like he has a scene where
he's had better performances, but I mean, he's good. I think he's good in this.
What better performance? I mean, Gran Torino, he's good too, but like there's a scene in this movie where he cries at church, and it's like believable. Like he's got a lot of range in this movie. He's asked to do a lot of things. Physically, I think he looks like an old boxing trainer, right? I mean, yeah, his stature is amazing in this movie. His outfits are amazing.
I mean, obviously he's great in Unforgiven. He's great in The Line of Fire and Bridges of Madison County and The Beguiled. I mean, he's got great performances. This is not. I don't think this is in his top 5, but I mean, he is still really good. He shouldn't have been nominated over Giamatti.
Well, I
think that's that kind of poisons the water a little bit, but all right. Well, let's move on. The minor character triumvirate, it goes to Zach first.
Okay, you're gonna have to remind me of what these categories are again.
Amazing Larry, Big Tim High Roller, the Charlie Duke Ticket Taker Movie Maker, and the Matt Damon What Movie Are You In?
Okay, so I know my minor character, and that's the first woman that Maggie fights. Now, I couldn't figure out what her name is, but she also could win the MDM, whatever we're calling this award, MDS, MDB, because Dale Dickey could probably play her. BDM. She's great. I like her. It looks like she's missing a tooth. She also looks pretty old. I mean, you got Frankie attacking Hilary Swank for being 31 years old. This lady looks like she's at least 40. Anyway, I want to know a lot more about that character. She fights dirty, man. You could just see like some barroom brawls in that character. In the echelon of great character actresses, Margot Martindale is obviously on the Mount Rushmore, but that lady also is in the Mount Rushmore of character actresses in this movie too. A movie maker. I'm going to say Angelica Houston because she gave the producer of the movie the book Rope Burns by FX O'Toole, so she's quite literally the movie maker. And what was the other one? Douchebag?
No, Matt Damon. What movie are you in? Matt
Damon. What movie are you in? I think it has to be Jay Baruchel. I don't know what Jay Baruchel is doing in this movie. I thought about ranking him as either the highest war performance or the worst performance. Maybe that says all you need to know about his performance in this movie. The range is pretty extreme. I think a lot of people forget that he's in this movie. I kind of forgot he was in this movie. And I also kind of forgot that he was in Todd's #1 movie of last year too. So I guess that's a lot of range. And why didn't you think of that, Jay?
Yeah, I'll start because I'll start with Matt Damon on my turn because I said Danger also. I think it's pretty obvious. That's the what movie are you in? But I think that's part of the point, but still. My Amazing Larry is a Father Horvath. Just the exasperation and I kind of feel for him. Like I feel like he's the teacher that has the kid in the class that always you say as a teacher there's no such thing as a dumb question, but you have that kid that always asks the dumb question. And
on your list last week.
Yeah. And then my movie maker, I'm going with Frankie's daughter for refusing to talk to him, which kind of leads to Frankie just kind of having the mindset he does and making Maggie the surrogate daughter. So I'm going with Todd.
My Amazing Larry is Billy's manager. He's only got a couple of scenes. I'm not really sure he really says a whole lot, but he has that look on his face when he's like, yeah, 60-40, we'll take 60, you get 40. And then Billy's like, what, are you just going to let him just walk away after he just talked to you like that? And he just got that look, he just shrugs. He's like, I mean, he's kind of right. Like, I mean, she is the draw. I could have seen a couple of scenes with that guy, but we don't, I mean, they're the villains. We don't really get time with them. Matt Damon, what movie are you in? Of course, Jay Baruchel. I also wrote down Marcus Chait, which is J.D. Fitzgerald, because I mean, in that family, even it's like Machine Gun Kelly or something was like randomly the brother of this. Like it's a weird choice to have that be the brother. And minor character who causes the movie to happen is Bobby Malone, and that is the guy that they tell the story about Frankie buying the gym from like 15 years earlier or something. So there was no gym, there's no movie.
Good call. All right. I'm first on Tripod of Depravity, the Stickman douchebag and most punchable face. The Stickman is obviously Big Willie. Because his name is Big Willie.
But it's also Willie Little.
That this is true. You did mention that, which did make me reconsider for a second, but no, it's him. And
what's that actor
guy,
from? You've seen him in stuff.
He most known probably now for being in the Netflix Marvel series Luke Cage. He was Luke Cage, and then he was in Men in Black 3. He was in Plane, the Gerard Butler movie from last year.
Halle Berry, Mark Wahlberg movie that came out.
Oh yeah, The Union. I haven't watched that yet. And yeah, he's kind of hanging around. He's in some stuff.
He looks like a boxer.
Douchebag.
He's a big dude.
Yeah, my douchebag. I've got a couple written down here. I'm gonna go with Sally, for taking on Maggie and hooking her up with a fight that he was hoping she'd lose, so that he could hook up his other fighter with another fight. Like that's a douche move to do. And most punchable face is the face that we all cheered at when it got punched, and that's Sharel. 100%.
He actually did lose a tooth.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, that's punchable face. All right, Todd.
Okay, Stickman. I wrote down Frankie, and because he does have a few lines like I'm wearing a beard because I thought it would help with the ladies or something. And also the first time you see him, he's talking to Maggie, or I like see him actually like in normal life. He's talking to Maggie, and then he's like, "Who are you? Do I know your mother or something? Or do I know your mama?" It was pretty much like, are you like some illegitimate kid of mine? I think is what he was pretty much asking. I think he gets around still, even at his age.
That's a great call.
Douchebag is Father Horvath. I mean, you can't stand outside your church and then curse at the congregation. And plus, I mean, he does have that exasperated look, but he also just kind of seems like he's an asshole.
There are no demigods, you fucking pagan. It's a great line.
Exactly. That's the one F-bomb they kept in it, because I mean, for comic effect, it does work, especially Clint's like reaction to it. He just has that like a half wry smile, like, So that was, you went there. Most punchable face, I wrote down Big Willie, because I mean, he's a boxer, of course, but he also does have like a really horrible thing that he does to Frankie, and he does it with sort of a black eye. So
is this potentially like the movie with the most punchable faces, just simply because they're all boxers?
Potentially,
like every character is a boxer except for the priest.
And we don't even know that for sure.
Well, and I guess Margot Martindale. All right, Zach, Tripod of Depravity.
All right, I also went with Sally for biggest douchebag, but not for the reasons that Terry said. I went with him because he wears a hat like a douchebag, and he has those glasses. You remember that? Wasn't there one trivia a long time ago that you were like, what are all the things that the guy has on? I thought that was going to be one of the questions about Sally. He's wearing a douchebag hat, a shit kicker hat, and he's got a necklace and glasses.
Couldn't you see Giamatti in that hat, though?
Yeah.
Like, that's why 90s Giamatti is Sally.
Stickman in the movie is JD, because that man has probably sired some children, would be my guess. And Punchable Face.
Sired some children.
Yeah, I didn't have a great one for Punchable Face, so I went with Chris Rock for making fun of Jude Law. Like maybe like Nicole Kidman would have gotten out of his hands and punched him. I did think of another great movie maker that we forgot about, though, which is Maggie's dad. I mean, if he doesn't kill Axel, how does Maggie ever get the idea to do what she forces Frankie to do at the end of the movie?
Yes, because watching your father put down a dog is the only way you could ever think of not wanting to live anymore.
I was also going to say Maggie's dad, isn't he like the dad in Anatomy of a Fall? Isn't that like the same storyline in that movie about putting down a dog and then it leads to a murder or something? I don't know. Maybe this is spoiler alert territory, but another cross section of cinematic universes.
I was gonna say for douchebag too, the real douchebag is Danger's dad, who
Oh, yeah,
the
that's a
impotent
great one.
son and dumps him
I
on,
wrote
on the
that down,
curb and then
actually.
drives out of town.
It wasn't his
And-
dad, by the way. It was his mom's boyfriend, remember? I even
Oh,
wrote this shit
right.
down.
Oh.
It was, yeah, that he dropped him off. Curious that they actually used a flashback to show that. Clint thought it was such an important aspect of the movie that he devoted 20 seconds to showing a truck with some guy getting out and presumably Jay Baruchel. So Joel Cox, Academy Award nominated editor, but had to throw that scene in there for some reason.
Well, yeah,
I
you
thought that
filmed
was
it.
gonna have-
It's Clint.
I
You got
thought
it.
that was going to have something to do with the movie. It never had anything to do with the movie. It was just a strange cutaway.
I saw trivia that $1 Million Baby was in the top 5 in the box office from the weekend it was released until after the Oscars.
But
Every-
it never like raked it in. Like the one weekend I was talking about in trivia was the only one it was like even over 15 million. But I mean it was just one of those like steady things, I guess. Word of mouth and everything.
Best scene in the
Yeah.
movie.
When he gets hired as her boss, when she agrees to him as boss. There, that's my pick. Great scene.
I'm going with the socks scene. It's just
I'd forgotten that scene.
I forgot about it too, but it's such a great scene.
I like how
There are
he
holes
was-
in your socks. These are my sleeping socks. Well, why are you wearing them in the daytime? My daytime socks have too many holes in them.
Probably the Mount Rushmore of socks scene in a movie. Movie socks scenes.
I mean, if we're not saying, I mean, I think the obvious choice is the end. Him revealing what Makrusha means and all that stuff like that, and pulling the tubes. Like that's the best scene. But if you're going something else, that's what I'm going with. Todd.
Well, the sock scene is funny, and you could tell from that scene especially just how close of friends like Frankie and Scrap are. Like they give each other shit. Like it kind of reminds me of Shelly and Bernie in the Cooler. Like it's like one of them is the boss, but they clearly have affection for each other. But there is like an uncomfortable, like unspoken thing between them. I don't know. I mean,
Well,
like,
and you could tell there
there's
was just
something
instant chemistry with Clinton Morgan too. Like they just got each other in a way that I don't think any of the other characters really did.
I mean, and there's only true friends could be like, he could give him shit and he'd be like, go to hell, and he's like, tell her not to come back without a belt, and he's like, okay. He's like, yeah, it's like, yeah, that's how friends talk to each other. My favorite scene is Maggie's first fight, where you have Frankie and Scrap up watching the fight, and Scrap's trying to have a conversation with him, and Frankie's just like, he's like, oh damn it, or in Jesus H, or whatever. He has like all of these
You're
like,
left.
PG-13 curse words that he keeps just like, he's like, oh man, and he just like walks down there, and like, I mean, that is the total grandfather moment where that could have been our grandfather, like watching us.
You know, I
perform.
thought about him a lot, especially as you watch Clint just kind of try and shadow box from the corner.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
like that looks like something our grandfather would do.
But I mean, it's a great scene, and one of obviously Zach's favorite characters in it. She's fighting, but he takes over the fight. He kind of sweet talks his way, or just like basically like, get the hell out of here. This is my fighter. That's a great part, and from that point on, the movie pretty much takes off, and a breathless last 90 minutes.
Regal quote or underrated lines. I don't know how it fit in, but I think the Regal quote has to be always protect yourself. But I don't really know where it fits in.
I don't train girls. That's the Regal quote.
There you go. Behind the counter, like the manager, it's like, this is a new
Yeah.
employee. I don't train girls.
Well, or I had Scrap says, "Girls got sugar." I don't know, something in Gaelic. I love his line delivery there. Like it's a great line, and I don't know how it's going to fit in the Regal commercial, but it should. My underrated line is, "What is Danger looking at?"
There are many moments where you catch Frankie just looking out, like, why is Danger punching the air?
Did he pay his dues? I can't even pay for pants. Like, how is he gonna pay his dues?
Yeah. It's so good. So good. I like that one. All right. Any flaws, anything outdated, any conspiracy theories you want to throw out there?
Todd brought up the best one, which is that there's no way Margot Martindale weighs 312
That was
pounds.
all I wrote down.
That's a great one.
I mean, that's such a weird thing to exaggerate too, in such an like a ridiculous way. Like 100 pounds, like at least, like exaggerating the weight of your mother. Like it was such a strange line.
It had been a while since she'd seen her. I mean, come on. Give a little credit there, maybe. All right, LVP, MVP. I'll go first. My LVP is the Oscars for nominating Clint over Paul Giamatti. That like I remember that nomination morning. I'm like, wait, what? What you did? What? It didn't make any sense. And my MVP is Hilary Swank. You're right. She's got 2 just random Oscars 5 years apart. Her career didn't necessarily warrant it, but the 2 performances did. And I mean, I could have seen her going and being like Meryl Streep, where like she's not the drop dead gorgeous beauty, but she's just really good at her craft. And if she just got the right roles, she could continue to be that. And I think if she's still this day, if she got the right role, she'd be right back there, but she just hasn't. So MVP, Hilary Swank. She made the movie happen. Funny enough, I saw that the original actress attached to play Maggie was Sandra Bullock, but this movie took so long to make that she was making Miss Congeniality 2 by the time it came around.
My LVP is, of course, like the referee in like basically every scene. They all suck, especially the last referee. And my MVP is Paul Haggis, because I think it actually is a really good script, and it's written in a way. I mean, it's I guess not obvious for a boxing movie, and plus I had read where the only reason he wrote this is because he got fired from his own TV show. Like he was a creator of a TV show and he got fired, and he wrote this and got because he was pissed off, and I mean, it became a Best Picture winner. I mean, that's pretty incredible, and he's obviously a super talented writer.
All right, my LVP is the trainer who moves the stool. He's also kind of the movie maker a little bit. Frankie kind of says, get out of the way while he's moving the stool. Who is that guy? I don't even know. And very, very unfortunate stool placement. That's also a Mount Rushmore stool placement in movies. This would have to be in the top 4. Unfortunate stool placement.
Okay. So when Frankie says to Scrap, it's your fault that this happened, where I thought he was going to go was, you didn't come with me, so you weren't the one that put the stool out there. And you would have put it out there right.
It's like, come on, rookie, park that thing, He's like
Frankie puts the stool out in every scene.
He could not do what Jack Swigert did. Anyway, my MVP of the movie is Universal Studios. Now, when the family goes to Universal Studios, Frankie, and then they walk in the hospital, Frankie says, well, you were out there seeing Mickey and Woody. Now, we know who Mickey is, but who is Woody? Is Woody from Toy Story, which is a Disney Pixar movie, or is it Woody Woodpecker? And I would think that Woody Woodpecker would be more Clint Eastwood vibe. I don't know if he's ever heard of Toy Story. Who did you assume?
I would think Woody Woodpecker.
I think so too, but I don't think they've had anyone in a Woody Woodpecker costume since about 1962.
Let's wrap it up. Quote of the day time.
My quote of the day comes from $1 Million Baby, and also could be the title of the movie, also could be the underrated quote. I'm shocked we haven't mentioned it yet. I'll just say that the words, fly there, drive back. That was funny. Mm-hmm. That was a Mount Rushmore of scenes where a character is paralyzed for life, but they actually say something funny. That would be up there.
It's a good one.
I mean, well, you have one of those in Remember the Titans too.
Yeah, that's true. We should do a Mount Rushmore of characters that get paralyzed. That's a good one because we got Gary Bandier or whatever, and Bertier, excuse me, and we could put Roger Ebert on the list as an honorary pick. I was gonna pick a Roger Ebert line from his review, but all of it is just incessant masturbation to this movie. I mean, it's like, whoa, daddy. I mean, wow. It is just, the juice is pumping.
All right. Well, my quote, I mean, you can maybe say it's related. It's from $1 Million Baby, and it's Maggie, and it's one of the funnier quotes. And it's I saw your last fight, Shawrell. Spent so much time face down, I thought the canvas had titties. But the best part is Danger. Canvas has titties, and he starts writhing all over the ground. Danger, get up.
Yeah, and that's when the movie you really think could have been a sitcom. Like kind of a Welcome Back Kotter, Yo Teach with Scrap as the authority figure. Shawrell, don't hit him. You got antics that happen. Really, we didn't do this the category if this had a sequel, but the sequel really is just the Hit Pit as a CBS comedy Thursday nights at 8:30.
Yeah. Who knows? All right. With that, we draw this podcast to a close. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll be back at you next week with another episode. Until then, have fun watching movies.
Broncos just got another safety.